Hello, MVP Days fans. Oh boy, do we have a great session coming up for you. I have the pleasure of delivering this session with my dear friend from Microsoft, Jaromir Kaspar, former PFE, now senior customer engineer, and you may know him as the founder, creator, inventor of WSLab. And if you don't know what WSLab is, well, I'm going to tell you something. You're sure going to know a lot about it after this session. And with that, Jaromir, why don't you explain to our MVP Days viewers a little bit about what we're going to talk about today?
Oh, awesome. Thank you for the introduction. I'm smiling here like, wow, it was a really good introduction. Thank you. Thank you for this. So today I would like to show you the new operating system Azure Stack HCI and how to deploy it with MDT. And I'll be doing everything with the WSLab, and I will be doing everything in my laptop. But everything you will see here, you can also do from your laptop to do real infrastructure. You can even, use the very same thing to deploy entire data center if you want. So it will be a hell of a ride today. In the end, you will see that you have your MDT database or MDT deployment workbench. That is something you can see on this slide on the left. And it will be deploying, in this case, virtual machines, but it can also deploy the real machines. And this will be zero-touch installation. It means it will boot and deploy operating system, and only if you want, right? So we will describe how to do it, how to target it to your machines, and everything will be, as always, just a scenario. And I would like to show you what the scenario actually is, right? So this will be like small introduction into the what WSLab scenarios are. If you will go to the GitHub page, right? And this is the only thing you have to do, right? Is type WSLab into your browser to search it with your favorite search engine, either Bing or Google, whatever. And the first link, hopefully, it will be GitHub page. And if you'll navigate to the GitHub page, you will see that there's a folder called scenarios. So a little bit step back, right? So WSLab is a code where you can create a lab on like several virtual machines, but it doesn't end here. After you will set up these virtual machines, what to do next, right? You have some virtual machines, but it's empty operating system. It's just domain join. So what next? So this is something I did, right? I did write some scenarios where you can use this empty lab and just configure it. But I'm super lazy, man. I'm super lazy. I'm so lazy that
Hold on. I've seen your code. You're not lazy. You help lazy people like me be better coders by being able to borrow your work.
That's something, that's because I was super lazy to do screenshots, to describe like, hey, go here and go there. All of this work is basically result of creating labs for Storage Spaces Direct. There was an official course, or still is, probably is not anymore, offered in a former Premier business, and we were supposed to create a new labs, and I was always so, how to say politely, in the French it's like pissed, something like that, right? I was so angry about how the labs so far used to look like. It usually were like several virtual machines that you imported and then somehow work with that. But importing virtual machine is so obsolete because it ages so fast. Because in 1 year it will be obsolete, it will be without any cumulative update, and to update it, it's so terrific. It's awful. And when you write a guide where you have to go to Server Manager, click on there, click on here, and do next, then you'll probably like, I was teaching so many courses where these people were, clicking on click next, and they failed like 90% times. So I always keep in these labs like this, click next, and then I'll do always explanation how to do it with code. But these scenarios are pure code. Because I'm lazy, I can set up this scenario in this 20-minute session, and I'll be deploying these machines in the 20 minutes, and hopefully even faster. So in these scenarios, you will find around 50 scenarios, some scenarios are really old. You can see in here that like BitLocker and S2D cluster is like 2 years ago updated, but it still will work. Maybe, you know, you need to be a little bit cautious about what you are doing. That's why we are able to run everything in a laptop prior to run it in the production, because you can even run this in the production, right? But you need to get familiar somewhere with the scripts, what it's actually doing. And this is why I invented this, not invented, I was basically, it was an idea to have something consistent. If I'll say now, Dave, I want you to try this and I'm failing this in this step, I can just give you lab config. So it will spin you exactly same virtual machines as in my site, and then I will give you a script. So you will get into the same exact point with the script.
Well, and
so everything, yeah.
And so that's actually raises a good question for me, is that all of these scripts that you have in here, normally setting up a lab environment like this is a real pain, because we've got to build some base VHDs and we've got to go through the process of what I'll call priming the lab. How long does it take to flip-flop for you between these scenarios with the tooling that you've done inside of here? So let's say today I want to do something on Azure Stack HCI with MDT, but tomorrow I have a little bit more time and I'm really interested in this Azure Stack HCI stretch clustering lab module that you've got in here. If I wanted to like just reset the lab and start over, walk me through like how much time would that take the user to do that?
Around 5 minutes. So you don't have to even clean up the lab. You can just add your machines into the lab config and run it again, and it will add more machines. And most of the times, if the machines are not the same names, you can just expand it, right? If you have enough RAM or storage, you can expand the lab and just, you know, follow up this scenario. So usually the scripts to deploy machines takes like, I don't know, 5 minutes. And then the scenario itself, it depends. If you just paste the script and just grab a coffee and wait, for example, stretch cluster is something around 30 minutes, just watching how it's happening. And meanwhile, you can just read what's it's actually doing. And you can click on the GUI and see what's happening in the GUI. If the cluster networks are renamed, if the IP addresses are specified, and so on. Let me go back to these scenarios because we have now limited time. So we will deep dive into this scenario exactly. And in this scenario, every scenario.
So Jaromir, yeah. I just wanted to let you know, because I'm in control of the show, I actually just gave you as much time as you need. So don't worry about the time or rushing for our fearless viewers here.
That's this is even better. So this is really great. This is really great news for me, right? So actually now you are looking at our scenario script, which always in the scenario folder, if you go a little bit back, there is a scenario folder. If you click in this folder, you'll find there more files. There's one README file that describes the steps that are happening in the scenario. So basically in there, you will find screenshots of each part. And the parts are in code that is living in the scenario.ps1. So basically open up the scenario.ps1 and copy the code into the PowerShell ISE. Right? I will show you everything. And if you hit Ctrl+M, you will collapse all the code to the regions. So you can then read the region. So there's a region to download and install the binaries. So you can expand it and read, oh, this guy is downloading the binary from here, binary from there. Oh, that's good. And you can just blindly run it and it will download for you binaries, right? So what it will do, right? So this code, this first code, what it will do on the domain controller, which is deployed, it will download and install ADK, download and install ADK Windows PE, download and install MDT, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. Then it will also download and install SQL Express, and then it will set up WDS, Windows Deployment Services on the DC. And it will also install, it will also configure MDT monitoring and some small configuration to MDT and I think WDS. We will deep dive a little bit more, right? We will click on the GUI and see what's happening. The next step, what we will do, and you notice that there's an exclamation mark. You know, you should adjust the lab prefix and VM path, because on my machine I have it on my E drive in my folder called WSLab something. In your case, it will be probably D drive or C drive or somewhere else. So you need to adjust it. So we'll take a look into that. And you will run this code from your Hyper-V host, because now we need to create empty or blank machines, blank VMs. and we will start these machines, and it will attempt to boot from the WDS. But because we configure WDS to not provide the image to the unknown machines, these machines will actually appear in the log. So we will go into the log after that and create a hash table out of the information of the machines that booted. And we first created first machine, then the second machine, and attempted to boot, and the third machine, and fourth machine. So what we will do then, we'll create a hash table out of the machines that attempted to boot. So we know that the first machine that attempted to boot will have the name Azure Stack HCI 1, and with IP address 101. And the second one will be 2 with 102, 3 with 103, and 4 with 104, right? So we will add the information about the machines into the SQL Express database, into the MDT database. And we will also add the information into the Active Directory object. So next time the machine will boot, it will be approved in WDS, it will be allowed to pixie boot, and it will actually reinstall. And it will automatically reinstall operating system zero touch installation, so you'll end up with the domain joined machine. So in the real world, you can have your WSLab DC machine, or in your case, it can be your machine somewhere with MDT. And if you will follow up the code, it will set up everything. But I prefer you to try it first with WSLab in the controlled environment. And then you will boot your first physical machine that will attempt to boot from Pixie, then the second one, then third one, and fourth one. And then you will basically do the same. Or if you already know your machines, in the hash table, there's an example where you can just basically create your own hash table out of your information about what MAC addresses you have, what GUIDs you have, and basically fill the database with these data. And then you can even fine tune it and just add drivers, add software, whatever you want. And you can end up with a fully deployed Azure Stack HCI operating system, and you can scale it then. And that's MDT, you can scale it.
And so Jaromir, that's a really cool solution using MDT to deploy, because obviously in the lab environment here, we're just going to show deploying to a blank Hyper-V virtual machine, but that could also be deployed to a VMware virtual machine. That could also be deployed to a physical piece of hardware. And
exactly.
then with the physical pieces of hardware, we can also take and we can also start working on some of the driver injection and some of the additional steps that might be required for a fully production ready server. Because a lot of organizations in the enterprise will use tools like MDT or Endpoint Manager, the new name for Config Manager, to actually deploy servers, and they'll build their kind of standard operating environment scripts into there. So it's the same every single time. So if I have to deploy 1, if I have to deploy 10, if I have to deploy 100 or 1,000, it's always the same.
But there's also one thing about this. If you compare this with the real scenario, this is limited, but this is good for you because there are less moving parts, because there is a controlled environment and you know how it should look like when it's working. So when you then go into your real environment with your domain control, with your GPOs, with your corporate policies, with your anti-malware, you know where to look for things. Because if something is not working, you can compare it with your environment that is actually working. So you have known, well-working environment, and you can then compare. So you have good, way to start. Yep. So actually, yes, after restart of the machines, you populated the database, it will just pixie boot and, roll the operating system. So let's take a look how it actually looks like when you will do it on your own in your machine. So I'll switch to my desktop. I'll go to my Explorer where I have my WSLab. WSLab scripts are really simple. There are only 3. There's one that is cleanup, one that is deploy, and one lab config. And lab config is something you have to populate if you'll go to the scenario. So let me just go to scenarios. So there's a scenarios in WSLab. We will go to Azure Stack HCI and MDT. And there is a lab config. The lab config is super simple. It's just one line. So basically you delete all the VMs because the only VM we will use is domain controller. So what I will do, I'll just check if in my lab config is this only one line. It's a little bit fine-tuned. There is one trick. For example, I comment out the prefix, because if I'll remove the prefix, the same way as I would delete the prefix configuration, it will use the name of the folder, right? I'll just unsave it. So if I'll run deploy, run with PowerShell, you can run it with always run this with the right click and run with PowerShell. It's the simplest way. And I think it doesn't even work great with the PowerShell ISE if you run it there. So now what it will do, it will import a machine, DC, and start it. And it will use the prefix of the folder. So if you have multiple labs, you can nicely recognize which one is one. So I will connect to this DC, right? So now it's pretty simple because, there is my domain controller, and I will just log in. Usually I will go with the scenarios the way that I will log into the domain controller, and it's described in the README, right? So what's in the lab, what you will find there. There's a lab config. In this case, I'm enabling telemetry, right? So we have some telemetry. Okay, and you will run all code from domain controller, and you will follow scenario.ps1, okay? And I will basically use the scenario.ps1. I usually go to raw because I want to see all the script. I'll select everything, copy it, and when I will log in into the domain controller, I'll just paste it into the PowerShell ISE. So I'll be able to read through the code and select only a few regions and just run the region. So let me log in. The default username is labadmin. Always use labadmin. Don't use built-in administrator. There will be some issues probably. Password is in the lab config. It's by default is ls1 setup exclamation mark. Funny thing is, this is the username and password of our internal labs that we use for training that we use for training escalation engineers. So this is basically when I was mentioning that these labs were created out of the first labs that were for the customers for Storage Spaces Direct. These labs were also used for training escalation engineers. Okay, cool. So let me just run PowerShell as an admin. That's one thing. I will always use one PowerShell window like this, and then I will use second PowerShell as a second PowerShell ISE. So I'll usually split into two windows. One is on the left, one is on the right, like this. Oh, and I will paste my code from the clipboard and hit Ctrl+M. So now you can easily read exactly the same as I was showing on slides, that there are some regions that you can run, and you can either blindly, for example, copy first region and just blindly paste it with the right click, or you can just go line by line and see what the guy is actually doing, right? So what I'm actually doing here is that I will specify my download folder. So in my case, it's user profile downloads. Okay, so if I'll go to my downloads, I should be able to see I should be able to see soon that it will be downloading some files, and these files actually I'm configuring here progress preference, so you will not see any numbers running here, because if you will see numbers running here, it will be really slow. So I'm disabling it because it will be then faster. And then I have the hash table of the files. So in this case, the first file will be ADK setup. As you can see, it already popped up here. The second one will be ADK WinPE setup. So there is also description, so you can read the description. There is one commented line because you can also, if you uncomment this one, you would also download the in this case, I think, yeah, SQL Management Studio. But yeah, and here we go. So for each file, I will, if it's not present already, I will download it. Right. Also, I will download ADK, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, and the last one will be just a HCI ISO file. And then I will install ADK, ADK WinPE, MDT, SQL Express, and yeah, that's it. So now,
while we're waiting for that to download, I just wanted to point this out because for some of our viewers that are out there, my journey with PowerShell started about 3 to 4 years ago. I was very novice 4 years ago, I'd say, with PowerShell. And one of the things that I highly encourage is that when you see code like this, for example, the ability to go, check folders to see if a file's been downloaded first and then download something from the internet, and even your little trick on step 9 with just removing the progress bar, that stuff's absolute gold for us that are learning PowerShell. There's so much more in this script than just building this scenario. It's such a huge learning exercise for those IT pros that are always learning to strive and get better with PowerShell. So I just wanted to point that out. Like that's part of this process that's really cool for myself, is that every time I watch a PowerShell session like this now, I'm always picking up new little gold nuggets like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and by the way, I'm also learning. So when I was putting together the scenario, right, I didn't know actually how to install SQL Express silently. So I had to experiment. Because of this scenario, you can spin pretty fast. So you can basically clean up, deploy like multiple times a day. Or I actually, to write down the scenario, I did clean up, deploy like 10 times, for example. And so I was able to, find somewhere on the internet how to install SQL Express. So I tried all the, all the parameters. So I tried almost everything to make it silent and to make it somehow install. And now what you can do, you can just copy it, and you have consistent way to download and install SQL Express and version 2019, right? And I think this one was a little bit tricky because I don't think you will find anywhere else this on the internet, because I was trying to find out how to install SQL Server. The only thing I found that this with the SQL 2019, it's a little bit different, and no one wrote there how to install it. But I somehow figure out how to install it. So now you don't have to care. And if you would compare this with a written guide, like usually you will find a written guide, like go into this address, click here, click there, and download a file. Like it's 10 steps, and these 10 steps are in one line. Actually, in multiple lines, you have like, for each file, just download it. There are my files. And if you were reverse engineer, you can just go, okay, this link is Windows PE. So you can transfer it or transform it into your own guide. But this is like a really dense. So that's why I was telling you that I'm super lazy, because now I can just right click the script and don't do anything. And we can now wait for the Azure Stack HCI ISO to download. So hopefully it will be soon, because I was like, it should be soon, hopefully. Anyway, so it's never ever, and it was never ever about automation. I heard people telling me, hey, this script is automation. No, it's not. It's the documentation for lazy people like me, because I hate screenshots. I hate comic books of screenshots for that you should go here and there. The best way to understand how to install something, in this case, it's to run ADK setup with parameters, with these features. And in this case, I will be, for the MDT, you only need deployment tools, and you only need user state migration tool, right? The only two things. If you will go with GUI and just double click ADK setup, you will see that if you would document it, you have to tell people, hey, just uncheck all of these options and check only these two. And in half of the people would probably mess it up. So anyway, if you are IT pro and writing documentation for someone that he needs to follow something, it's so much easier to do it with the code, because they will not mess it up unless they will write the code to paste the code into the wrong server.
Well, and one of the other things that, while we're waiting for this to download, that's so important is your blocks of regions that you have here inside of your code are so cool, because now if I want just a downloader, I can actually just take the first region and I basically have the guts of a downloader module pre-built for me. You can put anything in there. You just have to find the download string and the silent install strings. And so if you're just looking to do automated builds of any servers, or just download some stuff, or just learn how this works, it's so cool to see that configuration, and then even automating later on the install of the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, some of the basic configurations. You write your code in a very similar way that I write my code, because I want my code to be readable to the regular IT pro, because there's ways to complicate this so that it's very hard to understand what's going on. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about the work that you do in your coding, is that it's very easy to understand what's going on as you read down the lines of your code.
Awesome, awesome. By the way, maybe we should pause it and just wait
Sure.
for this region to finish, because we will download Azure Stack HCI. I think it will take not many minutes. It will be like 2-3 minutes, but I think we don't have to bother people before waiting for the download and install something.
All right, sounds good. I'll pause the recording and then we'll come back here. All right,
Cool.
we're back. How long, Jaromir, would you say that took to actually complete? I don't know. I went and had a bathroom break and grabbed myself a beer, because this is pretty cool. I wanted to finish watching this. So.
Oh, cool. So since we posted, it was 8 minutes. So it's now 11:09, and I think it was exactly 11 when we hit the pause button. And now we can see that SQL Express is installed, so it finished this region, and we can now continue. So let's take a look what actually happened. So every region, you should then step back and explore what actually happened. So you can see now that we have a Microsoft Deployment Toolkit installed. So if you open up the deployment workbench, we should probably see something, probably not anything. Or do we have anything? Probably not yet. We don't have anything. We don't even have a deployment chair. There's nothing. We can also explore if you have a SQL Express installed. So there's a SQL configuration manager, so something is there. SQL Server 2019, okay, something is there. Windows Kits, so there's ADK, so now it's installed. So now I think we are good for this part. We didn't see anything red, so we should be fine. So the next step will be to configure MDT. So actually you can do blindly copy and just again blindly paste it, like like if you don't want to know anything, if you are in demo, if you want to really look really smart and just show customer, hey, now I will configure MDT, and just right click and paste everything, it will magically happen.
You know what this reminds me of is just copying your Cisco config into an SSH session, just blasting your Cisco config in.
This is actually that I'm not going to configure it in the production, right? I'm doing it in the test, so I know actually what's happening. But if I'll open up the region, you can see that I'm importing MDT module that is located under program files. So once the MDT is installed, you can find their new module, and if you list what commands are available, that is something I'll do for you. You can see, oh, there are many MDT commands, and you can do everything in the PowerShell. That's awesome. So let's create new deployment chair, right? And let's map it as a PS drive and do some configuration, right? So in this case, I will enable named pipes for the SQL Server, because this is then needed to access the SQL database, because MDT is using named pipes. Right, so we need to set the SQL browser to be starting automatic start date and create new database for the MDT. So if you'll go here, after refresh, we should see this. We should see also database, and I think it should be connected now in the SQL. I think, yeah, it's connected here. Nice. MDTDB and the SQL Express. So you don't have to know anything, and you can just go and see, okay, the guy is probably configuring some deployment chair properties. So you can then go and take a look in the properties of the deployment chair and see that there was something configured in here for the x64. And you can basically just, modify it for your purposes and just, do whatever you want.
It's so cool too, because the other thing that we can also look at doing, and maybe we can reach out for some help to the community here once they start using this scenario, is that once you build a task sequence for a particular make and model of hardware, and there's drivers and things like that that are going to be updated, there's no reason why we can't pull that down off of your GitHub repository and add to that, so that we can make this even more real world, so we get the community to participate in this as well.
This would be really awesome, right? If the OEM would, work with us, or the community can work with some OEM and say, hey, let's do a task sequence for the Dell or Lenovo or DataOn or anyone. We can first there is already an operating system, but we can also go and import drivers, or go and import some packages like if you have some OEM tools. So you can have a task sequence, special task sequence for any OEM, and it will be consistent for everyone. And we can then troubleshoot within the community even faster things, because everyone will have the same thing, right? And we will be able to, trace down the different settings more easily, because we can ask him, hey, what task sequence did you use? And he will say, oh, I did use this task sequence version, this one, that one. Oh, we fixed in that task sequence these drivers, so maybe you should try the new task sequence. And it will be always consistent, so everyone will have the same configuration. That would be super awesome. Right, so we have now in the,
yeah, let's see what the next section is. What's up next for us here?
Oh, so we have now the task sequence, right? So there's a task sequence called Azure Stack HCI deploys. So now the region to configure MDT is there. And now I need to create a MDT runners account. So let me just create it. So it's new user. Oh, now I'm adding some rights to be able to domain join machines. So I'm giving this user ability to do domain join machines into this organization unit. So I also refer this URL where I'll store everything. So you can, if you will blame me for modifying the permissions wrong, you actually don't have to blame me, but this site. That's where so basically I'm using, I needed to modify the permissions into the Active Directory. So when I will be domain joining these machines that I will deploy, it will actually land in here, simple MDT user account, because this guy is just domain user. I didn't do any Power account. Then I will edit the bootstrap in it, so you can see that I'm filling the content. So I just want to make sure that there will be deployment share. There is actually deployment share, but you need to know where it is. And to know where the deployment share is, you need to fill this bootstrap.ini, bootstrap ini. So let me just populate it bootstrap. Let me just, simply copy and paste it. Right. And now I will generate new Windows PE image. So this bootstrap ini will be in the Windows PE image that I will then add into the Windows deployment services. So when the machines will boot, they will boot this Windows PE image from the Windows deployment services. Right.
Fantastic.
All right, so this is basically the same as you would go and say update deployment share in here. It would then build the Windows PE image, which will be located. Let me think a little bit more. I think it will somewhere. Yeah, it's in. No, it's not here. It's in. Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, in deployment share, I guess. And
I think it's under boot. Yep.
Yeah.
So she should be getting created in there under x64.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So somewhere here it will be probably create captures. No, definitely. Control. There should be bootstrap ini. So this is my bootstrap ini. So in your real world, you should at least change your username and password. And this is, by the way, in the plain text. So then probably everyone who has access to the Windows PE will be able to domain join machines. So you want to keep this machine this user account limited as possible, because it's basically plain text in the bootstrap ini. Right. So it will be soon updated. So let me describe you the next step we'll be doing. So the next step will be to install and configure Windows deployment services. So I'm using WDS util, and I'll be configuring it to answer only known computers. And if there will be this will be known computer, it will let it boot. But if it will not be known computer, it will abort the boot. And this setting will actually make it write to the event log that it refused to boot someone, right? Otherwise, you will not know, and you will not be able to see anything in the event log. That's why I'm setting this. I was experimenting it. I was a little bit experimenting, so there are some commented lines with different settings, but this one will make it so that all the known computers means that the computer will have some attribute in the Active Directory, and I will show it later. And so the machine will be known to the WDS and it will boot, right? And if it's not known, it will not boot. So let's copy this step, because I think this will be finishing soon, I hope. Right, it should take not much.
Yeah, it normally takes about 3 to 5 minutes to build that. So.
Right, you can customize almost everything here. The MDT is at least 10 years old, but actually it's constantly updated. Michael Niehaus is still working on it, and I don't think there are many bugs, but you can customize almost everything. You can customize your background image in the Windows PE task sequence. So you can be there can be your corporate logo. So if you want to show this to your boss, you can put there your own logo and say and demonstrate how you would deploy all of these machines. And you can deploy not only Azure Stack HCI operating system. You can install Windows 10 machines. You can install Windows Server machines. You can install almost anything. So let's configure now WDS. Should be really fast. It's basically installing the Windows feature WDS. Now in this scenario, I was again lazy. So I'm doing everything on a domain controller. So I'm actually running everything on this machine. In the real world, you would probably invoke everything to the remote machine because you don't want to, log into your machine where you do everything. You would normally have one management machine. And from the management machine, you would configure entire infrastructure. So you would probably configure a remote server to be Microsoft Deployment Toolkit with all of this stuff. Okay, so WDS is configured. So the last step is to configure monitoring. So whenever I will be deploying something, I will see the progress in the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. So it will be in here. So now monitoring is configured. Okay, so there is one next step. So there's a big, exclamation mark, like, hey, run everything from now from Hyper-V host, and you should adjust lab prefix and VMs path. So in my case, my lab prefix is this. It means that my domain controller has this prefix. So now it's the same as in my environment, but you should at least modify the lab prefix if you have different, and also VMs path, the VMs that will be created. So these will be the vanilla virtual machines, and I will be pasting this to my Hyper-V host, not into their lab, but in my Hyper-V host to create few more machines. So there will be first machine, and it will then, oh, it's dancing up and down. Still buggy. Come on, right. And it will be, let me just try to filter it like this. Okay, so it will spin the first machine and boot it. It will attempt to boot, but it will not get any response. So it will end up in this, right? It will attempt to boot over PXE, but there will not be any offer. And as soon as you will not receive anything, it will not boot, first of all. And the second is that there will be a message in the event log. So you can reverse engineer it, and you can see that in the log called Microsoft Windows Deployment Services, there will be some message about the ID 4132. So you can manually go into the event viewer and see it by yourself, right? There will be a log saying that some machine attempted to boot. Okay, Microsoft Windows Deployment Services, was it? Deployment Services. And which one was it? Operational. And we can see that there was a machine that attempted to boot. It was ignored because it's unknown. And its hardware address was 00155D, whatever. So it's MAC address. There's a device ID, and there's some IP it got from the DHCP, right? It's not pre-staged, it's nothing. I don't know what it is, but I know that the first machine that started is my first Azure Stack HCI one, and the second and third and so on. So what I do have here, I have like scope. So this will be like a IP addresses that I will be adding to this machine. So first one will be 101, the second one will be 102, and so on. So it will look like this, right? So this is in the real world environment. You can also fill it like this. You don't have to let machines boot. You can create your own hash table. So this is commented out, but let me just grab the machines IDs from the event log like this and create the hash table. Copy and paste. Right, so it was easy, right? So let me just show you that there is a hash table of my machines. And what I did, so first will be 101 with this MAC address. So what I will do, I will create DHCP reservations for these machines. So next time it will boot from Pixie, it will already receive some IP address that I want. In the real world scenario again, what you can do, you can configure DHCP reservations and configure DHCP so it will not give any IP address to no one, the machines that DHCP doesn't know. So if you have a security department, like double quoted security department that requires you to not have any DHCP in your server scope, you can configure DHCP to answer only to known machines and then create some DHCP reservation out of the hash table of the known machines you already have. Because I'm super lazy, I was digging all of this information from the event log. So now I will just create DHCP reservations. So if you'll go to DHCP in here, you will see that the reservations are in place. The scope, reservations, so reservations are in here. Leases, that's inactive. But after what I will do now? Yeah, now I will add the information into the MDT database and into the Active Directory object. So let me just paste you this. Okay, it will need to have some, what I am actually doing here, some MDTDB tool, right? I will connect to MDTDB and add the host into the MDT database. So if I'll go in here into the database, I should have my computers here and some roles. So every computer, if I'll go to it, it has now the UID MAC address, the name. There should be some details in here, I think. Yeah, the computer name, everything. It's now in the database, so everything will go from the database. You can add your applications in here. You can add the roles. So you can create a central role. So in my case, I have domain join, and I have also role to deploy Azure Stack HCI operating system. But you can also have the role to deploy different task sequence. So in this case, there should be task sequence name only, I guess. There's finish action log off and what to skip, and somewhere there should be what task sequence to deploy, right? So, and also in Active Directory, I should be able to see one attribute. And by the way, let me just go back into the scenario in here, because everything I'm showing you here is actually on these screenshots. So if I'll scroll in here, you should be able to see the GUID. So if I'll go to the screenshot in here, you can see that if I'll go to computer properties in Active Directory users and computers, you should be able to see this netboot GUID. And this is what identifies a known computer. So if you'll go to Windows Deployment Services, you'll be able to see these pre-staged devices. So now, when I will reboot the machine, it will, reboot and actually go download Pixie image and boot from the Pixie. So let me just finish with these regions. So I'll also replace custom settings to custom settings INI, which is the configuration file for the Windows Deployment Services. So it will actually use the database that I just filled in. And then I will configure SQL Server. So MDT user account will be able to grab the information from the SQL Server, because I need to set up the SQL permissions correctly, right? So yeah, first of all, I need to set up the new firewall rule to accept UDP traffic on port 1434. So, and then configure this MDT account to have a rights to the SQL database. So something you would have to figure out. So this took me like 3 nights to create, but I think it's pretty amazing now, because you can just paste it and drink coffee and do nothing, and then see how it's actually working.
Well, and I think that that's an important piece to understand for everyone watching these videos that we put together, is that the development time that goes in for figuring out these scenarios and the engineering time that goes into this is pretty profound. So I just want to once again thank you from the Azure Stack HCI community for all your hard work, because these are pretty robust and pretty cool scenarios.
Right. So, and I know it will be working every time you do it, because it's not following the guide, like where you misclick something and it will not work. This is just pasting script, and you can just watch it if it's read or not. So what I will do now is turn off these machines, because there is no operating system, so you cannot shut it down. So you just turn it off. Then I will just start it, and I will right click and connect to it. So you will see what's actually happening now. So, and this is pretty cool, because now you'll see that now it's pixie booting. Now it's downloading this light touch PE we created, and you can have as many machines you want here, right? And what's even better is that you can go in here and monitor the progress. So now there is no progress yet, because we are not yet in the task sequence. It didn't exchange any information. So now it's getting there. There is your background image. You can customize this. All right, so let's see if there is something going on. Refresh, not yet. Now it's getting the information about the computer. It will then connect to the MDT, then connect to the MDT database, processing these settings. So now it's connecting to the MDT database. We should start seeing something. So we can see that these machines are actually, the deployments are running. We should see what step. So now it's formatting disk. Oh, that's awesome.
Nice. So you basically set this up as a zero-touch MDT Azure Stack HCI loader.
Exactly. So imagine that you have like a real-world full rack of the servers. Something will happen, and you don't want to troubleshoot. You're just too lazy. So the only thing you have to do is to let it boot from the Pixie on the next reboot, and it will reinstall.
Now, and
right?
that,
so okay, that
there
are some actions, right? There are some precautions. You cannot just do this, right? You need to disable this, right?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Is you have some fail-safes in place where you have to manually add the machines into the MDT database, update the Active Directory attribute, and those pieces are kind of the fail-safe from preventing somebody from accidentally just pixie booting and going and mass wiping all your servers. So,
right.
Yeah, I really like this. Like you're very close. Even although we're in a lab, this is very close to what you'd see in real production.
So in real production, what you would do is actually you can have multiple fail-safes. You can have DHCP that will not provide you IP address. So as soon as you will disable DHCP, it will not pixie boot. That's first fail-safe. The second fail-safe can be that you can remove the attribute from the Active Directory. So it will not be pre-staged, so it will not boot. And the third fail-safe is that you can configure server to not boot from Pixie. Right, so it will be the second option if the operating system failed. So you can have these three fail-safes. So you should be, it would be the same as shooting you to the leg, right? If you want to do that, then there are multiple fail-safes on your firearm. So if you are enough stupid to, let your gun chambered and then, unleash everything and then shoot yourself, then okay, go. But there are so many things you can do as a precaution. Not let it boot from the Pixie, disable the DHCP, remove all the DHCP options, everything. I don't know, multiple steps you can prevent this. So you will not have and still, right, you can also, if you have SCCM, for example, if you also have to have the fail-safe there, because if you just wrongly move your the machine into wrong organization unit or wrong, how's it called in SCCM, basically you can reinstall your operating system really easily in this SCCM. You can just assign the task sequence, and next day you will have Windows 10 on your servers, which happened multiple times in multiple organizations.
Yeah, sure has, absolutely.
So this is, just the easy way. And remember, MDT is for free, SQL Express is for free, and everything basically you saw here is for free, except the domain controller, which is Windows Server Data Center, and except Azure Stack HCI OS, which is evaluation. But yeah, all the deployment tools we used are free. And as you can see now, the machines are booting. So it's almost completed. I think it will finish under 5 minutes. So it will be 4 and something minutes.
Well, and it's really cool too, because then if you wanted to wipe, reload, or create some more machines and try different scenarios with Azure Stack HCI, you wanted to re-image that physical hardware that you have, because I think one of the goals that you were looking at with this particular solution is moving out of WSLab and being able to fully populate production physical bare metal hardware. Now we've got a solution that'll work on bare metal hardware, and tweak it and tune it to your heart's content. Be an active part of that Azure Stack HCI community with us, and participate. I think we can build some pretty cool mods to this.
Exactly, right? Because now we will have the vanilla operating system image, right? But the next step would be probably to implement all of the tasks that are done prior to creating a cluster. So if you'll go to S2D hyperconverged scenario, and the scenario of PS1, there's so many steps you have to do, like install Hyper-V, install failover clustering, right? Install the duplication, all the roles. Then you need to configure a Spectre meltdown, do the Windows updates, inject the updates, I don't know, something, modify the memory dump settings, create active memory dump. So all of this can be already part of the task sequence.
Can be part of the task sequence, and there's nothing to say that once the machine's not joined to the domain, that we can't still PowerShell to configure as well, right? So
right.
So many options.
Right. So as you can see now, if I'll log in into the machine, I really don't want to, right? So let me just switch user, right? Because by default it's administrator, but I think it will be random username, random password. So let's do other user, and as you can see here, it's domain joined. And if I'll go to my domain controller and I will add my service here, you'll be able to see that I already have these servers as in the domain, and I'm able to add it. Cool, isn't it?
That is absolutely fantastic. Well, we've gone a little bit over time with this session, but I hope that all of our viewers really found a lot of value in this session. I know that I sure did. Jaromir, as always, a big supporter of our MVPDays community, Azure Stack HCI community, and PowerShell communities. We really thank you for all your hard work and for you putting in the time to join us today.
You're really welcome. And the last thing I would like to show you is to clean up the lab, because now it was not actually too hard to set it up, right? I just pasted some scripts and it was so fun for me, and I can do it over and over. What I like so much is to clean up the lab. So just right-click, run with PowerShell on the cleanup. It will ask you, based on your lab config, it will ask you what machines you want to clean up. It will be always the ones that are specified in the lab config using the prefix. So in my case, it is the folder name because I don't have any prefix. It will ask you, hey, do you want to remove all the machines? And you will say yes. And what it will do, not yet, what it will do, it will revert the snapshot on the domain controller, because there is always a snapshot or checkpoint. So you have a blank starting point, always the same. So all the changes will be only in the checkpoint, so you will revert it and then remove all the machines. So, and this will take, let's calculate, like 10 seconds. Now it's done.
Nice. Right on.
So now it's sending telemetry, and now, yeah, it's done. And you can now again deploy and repeat the lab over and over and try it again and again.
Awesome. Well, I think with that, we're going to have to probably move on to our next session. Once again, thank you very much for joining us here today, and you're always welcome with MVPDays.
Awesome. Thank you.